Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into the core doctrine of organizational leadership. We're looking at that whole framework for strategy, for operations, and importantly, what kind of character is demanded from professionals in these really high-stakes, uncertain environments.
That's right. And it's not just theory, is it? We're talking about the principles that, actually guide how command and control works, how leaders are developed. It's really about connecting who a leader is, their character, directly to how they act tactically and how that impacts strategic success.
Yeah, exactly. So our mission today is to sort of unpack that. What does a professional need to be, and what do they actually need to do? And we're grounding this whole discussion in some pretty foundational texts.
We are. We've got Army Doctrine publication 5.0, the operations process that gives us the how things get done framework.
Right, the mechanics.
Then there's Army Doctrine publication 622, Army Leadership and the Profession. That digs into the personal side, the attributes, the competencies.
What leaders need to be.
Precisely. And to see how this all plays out under extreme pressure, we're looking at a really compelling analysis by Edward Bowie, The Challenge of Leadership in 8th Air Force during World War II. It shows these principles tested, in the crucible.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Command and control. What exactly is that, doctrinally speaking?
Well, at its heart, it's the formal exercise of authority and direction. A properly designated commander directs their forces to accomplish the mission. It's about authority. It's about direction. Pretty straightforward on the surface.
But the environments are anything but straightforward. They're chaotic, unpredictable. So the Army doesn't just rely on like a rigid top-down thing.
No, absolutely not. That wouldn't work. The core philosophy is mission command, and this really comes from acknowledging a fundamental truth. No single commander, no matter how brilliant, can possibly know everything or make every single decision when things are changing fast. It's just not possible.
So what does mission command emphasize instead?
It emphasizes decentralized execution, empowering subordinate leaders, trusting them to make decisions that fit the situation as long as they operate within the higher commander's overall intent. You give them the what and the why and trust them with a lot of the how.
And that trust, that seems like the absolute linchpin.
It is. It's the key to keeping up momentum, to acting faster than the enemy. Without that trust, the whole system grinds to a halt.
Okay, let's dig into that system then. The practical framework you mentioned from Army Doctrine Publication 5.0, the operations process, it seems to be this continuous loop.
That's a good way to put it. It's a continuous cycle of 4 main activities. Planning, then preparing for the plan, executing the plan, and all the while continuously assessing how things are going.
And the goal here isn't complexity, right? It's about speed.
Exactly. Speed and effective action. The whole point of this framework is to make timely, good decisions and then act on them faster than the enemy can react. If your decision cycle is shorter than theirs, you create this tempo, this rhythm that they just can't keep up with. You maintain the initiative.
Which reminds me of that famous quote from General George S. Patton Jr., something about perfection being the enemy.
Oh yeah, the best is the enemy of good. He said, "By this I mean that a good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan next week."
Violently executed now. That really hammers home the point about action over endless refinement.
It does. Because think about it, while you're spending time trying to perfect that plan, what's the enemy doing?
Recovering, reinforcing, changing the whole situation.
Exactly. The situation doesn't wait for your perfect plan. A good enough plan, executed with aggression, with confidence, now that's what seizes the initiative and keeps it.
And driving this whole process, keeping that tempo up, that falls squarely on the commander. You're described as the most important participant.
Absolutely central. And the doctrine outlines 6 key functions they use to drive it: understanding, visualizing, describing, directing, leading, and assessing. They're all interconnected, happening almost simultaneously sometimes.
Let's touch on those first 2, the really conceptual ones. Understanding and visualization. Understanding sounds foundational.
It is. You have to understand the operational environment. The terrain, sure, but also the enemy, the local culture, the political situation, your own forces' capabilities and limitations. If you misunderstand the problem, even the most brilliant plan is doomed from the start.
How do commanders build that understanding? Is it just reading reports?
No, definitely not just reports. The doctrine actually emphasizes getting out there. Commanders need to circulate within their area of operations, see the ground, talk to people, get a feel for the context that you just can't get from a map or a briefing.
But they have to accept it won't be perfect, right? There's always uncertainty.
Always. Time constraints, fog of war, complete understanding is usually impossible, and that's where visualization comes in. It's the commander's mental leap, taking that incomplete understanding, mixing it with their experience and judgment to envision a desired end state, what success looks like, and then formulating a broad operational approach, the main path to get there.
Okay, so they understand the situation, visualize the goal and the path, then comes describing it.
Exactly. They need to clearly communicate that vision, the end state, the operational approach to their staff and subordinate commanders. Everyone needs to be on the same page about where they're going and generally how they're getting there.
Which naturally leads into directing action.
Right. Directing is about making the vision concrete, approving the detailed plans the staff develops, issuing orders, setting up command relationships, who reports to whom, and, critically, allocating the resources needed. The people, the equipment, the supplies.
And how does that differ from leading?
Leading focuses much more on the human element. It's about influencing people, providing that sense of purpose, giving clear direction, but also fostering motivation. It's not just about accomplishing the mission now, but also about improving the organization, making it better for the future.
Got it. So let's dive into the first major activity in that cycle, planning. The doctrine makes a distinction here, doesn't it? Conceptual versus detailed.
Yes, a very important distinction. Conceptual planning is what you might call the art of operations. It's very much commander-led. It's about understanding that environment, framing the problem correctly, defining that desired end state, and developing the broad operational approach. It's the why and the what in big brushstrokes, the overall theory of how victory will be achieved.
And then the staff takes that broad concept
And translates it into a practical reality through detailed planning. This is more the science of operations. It's heavily staff-led. They work out all the specifics, the scheduling, the synchronization of different units, movement tables, fire support plans, logistics, all the intricate coordination needed to make the concept actually happen.
That sounds like an enormous amount of work.
It is, but here's the key insight from the doctrine about all that planning effort. The real measure of a good plan isn't whether everything goes exactly according to script.
Because it never does.
Yeah.
No plan survives first contact.
Right. Exactly. The true test is whether the plan helps the force act effectively and adapt when things inevitably go wrong, when unforeseen stuff happens. Does the plan provide a solid enough baseline and enough flexibility to allow for intelligent adaptation? That's the measure of success.
And to maintain that flexibility, there are different types of planning documents mentioned. Operation plans, operation orders, and these things called fragmentary orders.
Right. So an operation plan, or O-plan, is usually developed well in advance, often for a contingency, something that might happen. It's very detailed.
Like a plan sitting on the shelf, ready to go if needed.
Pretty much. Then you have the operation order, or OPORD. This is the formal directive to execute an operation now, or starting at a specific time. It takes an O-plan, or parts of it, and makes it the current mission.
Okay, so O-plan is what if, OPORD is do this now. What about the fragmentary order, the fragord?
The fragord is all about speed and flexibility during execution. It's a much shorter, abbreviated order that modifies an existing OPORD. Instead of rewriting the whole big document when something changes mid-fight, you issue a fragord that just changes specific parts. It's absolutely critical for maintaining tempo because it allows for rapid adjustments.
That makes sense. You can't stop the whole operation to write a new novel every time the enemy does something unexpected.
You'd lose instantly if you did. The fragord keeps things moving.
Okay, so planning is done, the order is issued, next comes preparation. This is where the plan meets reality before execution.
Exactly. Preparation covers all the actions units take to actually get ready to execute the plan. Things like checking equipment, positioning supplies, reconnaissance, but also, really importantly, things like back briefs and rehearsals.
Rehearsals seem key. Why are they so emphasized?
Because they build shared understanding. When units rehearse parts of the plan together, everyone sees how their piece fits into the larger picture. It uncovers friction points, coordination issues, misunderstandings before bullets start flying. It ensures subordinate leaders truly understand the commander's intent and their specific tasks.
And there's something called a confirmation brief, too.
Yes, that's another tool for shared understanding. A subordinate commander briefs the higher commander on their understanding of the mission, the intent, and how they plan to accomplish their part. It's a final check to make sure the message got through clearly before execution.
Within the headquarters itself, there's also a crucial preparation step. Mention the plans to operations transition. What's that about?
That's an internal shift. Responsibility for the very near-term execution of the plan moves from the planning team, who look further out, to the current operations team, who manage the minute-to-minute fight.
Why is that shift important?
It frees up the planners. Once the operation starts, they shouldn't be bogged down in controlling the current actions. They immediately need to start thinking about what next. Planning for different branches, basically pre-planned variations if the main plan hits a snag, and sequels, the operations that will follow the current one. It keeps the command looking ahead, staying proactive rather than purely reactive.
Which brings us to the core of it all, execution. The doctrine describes this as seizing and retaining the initiative, maintaining momentum, exploiting success. Let's break that down. What does seizing the initiative actually mean in practice?
It means you're making the enemy react to you. Your actions are forcing them to respond, putting them on the back foot, creating problems they have to solve instead of executing their own plans. When you have the initiative, you dictate the terms of the engagement, you control the tempo.
And exploiting success. That sounds opportunistic.
It is, in the best sense of the word. If something goes unexpectedly well, the enemy collapses faster than expected, a key weakness appears. You can't just stick rigidly to the original plan. You have to rapidly assess. Can we achieve our objectives more easily now? Should we change the plan drastically to take advantage of this? Can we speed things up, maybe skip a phase? Exploiting success requires quick thinking and decisive action to capitalize on opportunities.
This need for speed and adaptation and execution, this brings us back to that Patton example during the Battle of the Bulge. That seems like a classic case study of the whole process working.
It's a perfect illustration. December 1944, the Germans launched this massive surprise counteroffensive in the Ardennes, punching a huge hole in the Allied lines. Patton's United States Third Army is engaged away to the south, facing a different direction.
And Eisenhower basically tells him, turn north now and relieve the guys surrounded at Bastogne.
Right, and Patton famously tells Eisenhower he can have 3 divisions disengaged, turn 90 degrees, and attacking north within 24 hours. Which sounds almost impossible.
But it wasn't just Patton being brilliant on the spot, was it? It was the process.
Exactly right. His staff, as part of their continuous planning, had already developed several contingency plans for different scenarios, including something like this. They had options ready to go.
So the detailed planning and preparation paid off.
Hugely. Patton gets back to his headquarters, gives a prearranged code phrase tied to one of those contingency plans, and bam, the machine starts moving. That forethought, the planning, the preparation, the clear directives already in place allowed 3 entire divisions to rapidly disengage, pivot, and launch a counterattack almost immediately. It was decisive.
An incredible example of agility born from rigorous process. Okay, so underpinning all of this, planning, preparing, executing is the final element, continuous assessment.
Yes, you're constantly assessing. It's not something you just do at the end. Assessment is defined as determining your progress towards accomplishing a task, creating a specific condition, or achieving an objective. It's what feeds decision-making. Are we doing what we set out to do? Is it working?
And it's described as a 3-part cycle itself.
Sort of, yeah. Monitoring, which is just continuously observing what's happening, gathering information, then evaluating, comparing what's happening against what you wanted to happen, judging progress, and finally, recommending or directing action based on that evaluation. Do we need to adjust? Do we press on? Do we need more resources here?
But the doctrine adds a really important caution here about not jumping to conclusions when assessing, especially with, like, human factors.
That's a critical point. It warns commanders to be careful about establishing cause and effect, particularly when dealing with changes in human behavior, attitudes, or perceptions, things that are hard to measure objectively.
So, just because you bombed X number of targets doesn't automatically mean the enemy's will to fight has decreased.
Exactly. You might be hitting targets, but if the underlying logic of your plan was flawed, maybe you underestimated their resilience or their political goals, then just measuring outputs won't tell you if you're actually achieving the effect you intended. Assessment has to look at the why behind the numbers, incorporate the logic of the plan itself, and use critical thinking to blend that hard data with the softer human realities.
Okay, so that's the operations process, this dynamic engine for action. But an engine needs a driver. Let's shift now to the leader themselves. Army Doctrine Publication 622 talks about the essential attributes a leader must possess: character, presence, and intellect. Let's start with character, the moral foundation.
Character is absolutely the bedrock. It's rooted in something called the Army ethic. This isn't just a list of rules, it's the whole set of enduring moral principles, values, beliefs, and laws that guide the entire profession. It's what creates the culture of trust that everything else relies on. It defines the shared identity of what it means to be a trusted Army professional.
And how does that ethic translate into practical terms for a leader?
Through the Army values. These are the practical application. Loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage.
Personal courage. That seems like one that gets tested often. It's not just about facing physical danger, is it?
No, it's twofold. There's physical courage, obviously facing danger, risking bodily harm, but then there's moral courage, which is often much harder. That's standing firm on your values, on principles, on what's ethically right, even when it's unpopular, even when you face pressure from peers or superiors, even if it might hurt your career.
The Doctrine gives a really stark example of this moral courage, doesn't it? The story of Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson Jr. at Miley.
It's an incredibly powerful example, and it shows just how deep this obligation runs. Thompson was flying a reconnaissance helicopter and saw American ground troops killing unarmed Vietnamese civilians. Horrific acts.
And he didn't just report it later. He intervened directly.
He landed his helicopter right in the middle of it, confronted the officer in charge. When the killing continued, he did something extraordinary. He landed again, positioning his helicopter between the American soldiers and a group of terrified villagers huddled in a bunker.
Putting himself and his crew directly in the line of fire from their own side.
Yes. And then he ordered his door gunners to train their weapons on the American troops and told them to fire if the Americans started shooting the villagers. It's almost unbelievable courage. He chose to uphold the fundamental Army ethic, the rules of warfare, the basic human decency, over loyalty to fellow soldiers who were committing atrocities. He risked everything to do what was morally right. That's the standard.
A heavy standard. Another aspect of character mention is humility. That might surprise some people.
It might. We often think of leaders as needing supreme confidence. But humility here isn't about being meek or timid. The Doctrine defines it as the absence of arrogance.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning a humble leader knows they don't know everything. They're willing to learn, they listen to others, they maintain an accurate sense of their own strengths and weaknesses. They balance that necessary confidence with self-awareness. Arrogance, the opposite of humility, makes leaders stop listening, stop learning, and that's incredibly dangerous when you need to adapt.
Okay, so character is the internal moral compass.
Yeah.
What about presence? This seems more about the outward impression a leader makes.
It is. Presence is how the leader carries themselves, how they look, act, and interact. The elements listed are military and professional bearing, fitness, confidence, and resilience. It's about projecting competence and commitment.
Fitness seems crucial here. And it's not just about running fast.
No, it's holistic fitness.
Yeah.
Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. The Doctrine calls fitness the cornerstone of combat readiness. It directly impacts a leader's ability to handle stress, make sound decisions under pressure, and lead from the front.
How does poor fitness impact decision-making?
It massively multiplies the effects of stress. If a leader is physically exhausted, mentally drained, emotionally frayed, their judgment suffers. Their ability to think clearly, to be mentally agile, which we'll get to, is compromised. Fitness provides a buffer, a reserve, to handle the immense pressures of command.
Which ties directly into resilience.
Absolutely.
Right.
Resilience is that ability to bounce back quickly from setbacks, from shock, from hardship, and stay focused on the mission. Leaders build resilience in their teams partly by personal example, showing they can handle pressure, but mainly through tough, realistic training that inoculates troops mentally and emotionally against adversity before they face it for real.
Okay, character, presence. The third attribute is intellect, the brain power aspect.
Right. This is about the leader's cognitive abilities. Key components are mental agility, sound judgment, and expertise.
Mental agility sounds like flexibility of thought.
That's exactly it. It's the ability to think flexibly, to anticipate changes, to break out of old habits or routine ways of thinking when the situation demands it. It allows leaders to quickly grasp complex problems, see connections others might miss, and adapt their approach on the fly. It's crucial for seizing the initiative.
And that agility needs to be paired with sound judgment.
Yes, sound judgment is the capacity to assess situations shrewdly, to understand the likely outcomes of different courses of action, and to make good decisions. often with incomplete information and under time pressure.
There's that quote associated with General Omar Bradley, isn't there, about where judgment comes from?
Yeah, the classic. Judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgments. It highlights that leaders learn and refine their judgment over time, often by making mistakes or observing the mistakes of others and consciously learning from them. It involves critical thinking, questioning assumptions, sensing those intangible factors.
Intellect also involves having the right knowledge. The doctrine mentions 4 areas of expertise.
Right. Leaders need broad expertise. First, tactical knowledge, understanding the fundamentals of warfighting, doctrine, capabilities, essential for mission success.
Second,
Technical knowledge, knowing the equipment, the weapons systems, the communications gear, the processes relevant to their field. Especially at the direct leadership level, subordinates absolutely expect their leaders to be technically competent.
third is joint knowledge.
Yes, understanding how the Army works with the Navy, Air Force, Marines, other agencies. Modern operations are almost always joint, so this is critical.
And lastly, cultural and geopolitical knowledge. This feels increasingly important.
Hugely important. Awareness of different cultures, languages, regional politics, global trends. Especially in multinational coalitions or stability operations, a lack of this knowledge can lead to major misunderstandings, offend local partners, and completely derail strategic objectives. It's not just nice to have anymore, it's essential.
So we've covered the attributes, what a leader must be. Now let's look at the core competencies, what a leader must do. The doctrine groups these into lead, develop, and achieve. Let's start with how leaders lead others.
This is about direct influence. It boils down to providing purpose, direction, and motivation. Purpose is the why. Leaders need to clearly communicate the overall goal, the reason behind the mission, so subordinates understand the bigger picture and how their actions contribute.
Direction is more the how and what.
Yes, giving specific instructions, setting priorities, establishing standards, but, and this is key for mission command, a skilled leader knows when to give very detailed direction and when it's better to focus primarily on the purpose and let subordinates figure out the how.
That sounds like mission orders again.
It is. By clearly stating the commander's intent, the purpose, the key tasks, and the desired end state, but leaving how to achieve it largely up to the subordinate, you promote initiative, flexibility, and speed. They can adapt to the local situation without constantly asking for permission, as long as they're fulfilling the intent.
And getting people to follow involves both compliance and commitment.
Definitely. Compliance means people follow orders, rules, regulations. It's necessary, especially for legal and ethical requirements. You have to comply with lawful orders.
But compliance alone is just doing the minimum.
Exactly. Commitment is different. That's when people willingly dedicate themselves to the cause. They buy in psychologically, they take ownership. Commitment is what drives people to go the extra mile, to use their initiative, to persevere through hardship. The best leaders inspire commitment, not just demand compliance.
And getting that commitment, getting mission orders to work, it all seems to circle back to building trust.
Absolutely non-negotiable. Trust is the glue. It's essential for mission command. It boosts readiness. It makes everything work better.
How is it built, according to the doctrine?
It's built over time through demonstrated competence people, trust leaders who know their job, through shared understanding and common experiences. Going through tough training or operations together builds bonds. And crucially, through consistency in character and behavior, leaders who are fair, reliable, ethical, who look out for their people, earn trust.
Okay, let's shift to the second core competency. Develops others. This sounds like it's about the long game.
It absolutely is. It starts with the idea of stewardship of the profession. This isn't just about training your immediate subordinates. It's an ethical responsibility to prepare the next generation of leaders, to ensure the long-term health and effectiveness of the entire Army.
So leaders are custodians, in a way.
That's a great way to put it. They're stewards, responsible for leaving the organization better than they found it. They see developing subordinates not as a chore, but as a fundamental investment in the future. They're thinking years, even decades ahead.
How does this development actually happen? Where does it take place?
The doctrine outlines 3 domains where development occurs. The institutional domain, that's formal schooling, professional military education. The operational domain. This is where most learning happens, through challenging assignments, deployments, realistic training exercises. Learning by doing.
And the third.
The self-development domain. This is about individuals taking ownership of their own growth, seeking out knowledge, reflecting on experiences, setting personal and professional goals. Good leaders encourage and support this self-development in their people.
And within their own units, what tools do leaders use to actively develop their subordinates?
The key tools mentioned are counseling, coaching, and mentoring. Counseling is focused on reviewing past performance and setting goals for the future. Coaching is more about teaching specific skills or improving performance on current tasks. Mentoring is a longer-term relationship, providing broader guidance, advice, and support for career development.
It sounds like creating an environment where people feel safe to learn, maybe even to fail sometimes, is important.
Critical. Development requires challenging experiences, but also a supportive climate where people can take prudent risks, learn from mistakes, those bad judgments that lead to good judgment without fear of undue repercussions.
This idea of a positive environment links to the third competency, achieves, but also to fostering things like esprit de corps.
Yes, esprit de corps is that vital spirit of the unit. It's the shared camaraderie, the mutual trust, the cohesion that holds a team together. It's built on shared history, traditions, pride in the unit, and strong leadership. It's what helps soldiers persevere when things get incredibly tough.
But environments aren't always positive. What about the opposite? The doctrine mentions counterproductive leadership.
Yeah, this is the dark side, sometimes called toxic leadership. It refers to leaders whose behavior violates core competencies or Army values. Things like abuse of power, bullying, dishonesty, selfishness, incompetence.
And the impact.
It's devastating. It destroys trust, crushes morale, inhibits initiative, and fundamentally undermines unit readiness and effectiveness. The doctrine is very clear. Leaders have a duty to identify and correct counterproductive leadership, both in themselves and others, because it can have catastrophic consequences.
Okay, so we've covered the individual leader and their core actions. Let's zoom out again and look at the different levels of leadership and the challenges they face, especially as things get more complex and strategic.
Right. The doctrine typically talks about three broad levels. Direct leadership is face-to-face, first-line leaders, platoons, squads, focusing on immediate tasks.
Then organizational leadership.
This involves leading multiple units, maybe hundreds or thousands of people. Think battalion, brigade, division commanders. They influence indirectly through subordinate leaders, dealing with more complex planning horizons and resource allocation.
And finally, strategic leadership.
This is at the highest levels, major commands, Army headquarters, Department of Defense. Strategic leaders deal with national strategy, international relations, shaping the entire institution, planning for futures measured in years or even decades. They have to translate very abstract goals into concrete actions for the whole force.
And often, they won't even see the results of their biggest initiatives during their own time in command.
That's often true. They are planting seeds for trees they may never sit under. It requires a very long-term perspective and a deep sense of stewardship.
This brings us back to that 8th Air Force analysis by Edward Bowie during World War II. It seems like a powerful case study of leadership operating under immense pressure across all these levels simultaneously.
It really is. Bowie argues that those air commanders faced a unique, crushing burden. They were formulating and executing strategic bombing theory, a strategic-level task. They were running a massive, incredibly complex organization with bases, aircraft, supply chains, organizational level. And often, they were dealing directly with the horrific losses and the human cost felt by their crews, a direct leadership connection, even if not physically in the plane.
And the core tension was between the strategic mission and the welfare of their people.
Exactly. They were pushing a strategic theory, precision daylight bombing that they believed could shorten the war and ultimately save lives by avoiding a bloody ground invasion. But the cost, especially in 1943 before long-range fighter escorts were widely available, was absolutely brutal.
The loss rates were staggering, far exceeding what pre-war planners thought was sustainable.
Way beyond. Doctrine considered 5% losses per mission may be acceptable. They're often facing closer to 10%, sometimes much higher on specific raids like Schweinfurt or Regensburg.
And that chilling statistic cited in the analysis, in 1943, the average life expectancy for an Allied heavy bomber crewman was something like 7 missions.
Just devastating. Imagine being a commander knowing that. Knowing you're sending crews out with those odds, the psychological weight, the moral burden of sticking to that strategic objective despite the immediate horrific human cost must have been almost unbearable.
Why did they stick with it? Why impose that tempo, accept that risk?
Because, as Bowie argues, the potential payoff was immense. If precision bombing could cripple German industry and morale, it offered a chance, maybe the only chance, to win the war decisively without the millions of casualties expected from a full-scale invasion of Europe. It was a calculated, incredibly high-stakes gamble based on a strategic imperative.
This intense, dynamic, high-loss environment surely highlights the need for adaptability.
Absolutely critical. Adaptability isn't just reacting. It's the ability to anticipate changes, influence conditions, and respond effectively when the situation shifts. It requires that mental agility we talked about, a willingness to challenge your own assumptions, to abandon plans that aren't working, and to accept prudent risk. You can't afford to get stuck in a comfortable rut when the enemy is constantly adapting.
And today, the speed is even greater, partly due to technology. The doctrine mentions the challenge of information overload.
Yeah, modern systems provide commanders with vastly more information faster than ever before, which is good in some ways, but it can also be overwhelming. It increases the potential for analysis paralysis and certainly increases stress.
So the answer isn't necessarily more information.
Not necessarily. The answer lies in the leader's intellect, their judgment, their ability to use that mental agility to quickly sift through the noise, identify what's truly important, synthesize it, and make timely decisions. It also reinforces the need for mission command trust subordinates to handle information and make decisions at their level rather than trying to funnel everything to the top.
And beneath all the technology, the process, the strategy, we always come back to the human dimension. Specifically, fear and courage.
Always. Fear is natural. It's a physiological response to danger. Courage, as the doctrine defines it, isn't the absence of fear, it's the ability to function effectively despite fear, to overcome it, to accomplish the mission.
How do leaders help their soldiers do that?
Primarily through preparation. Realistic, tough training builds confidence and resilience. Good planning reduces uncertainty. Strong leadership, that presence, that esprit de corps, provides motivation and support. Leaders need to understand the psychological impact of operations on their people.
Which means they need to listen.
Critically important. Doctrine emphasizes that leaders must get candid input from subordinate commanders who are closest to the fight. They need to understand the real psychological state of the troops, the fear, the fatigue, the morale. A commander sitting miles away can't just rely on status reports. They need that human input to make sound decisions that account for the reality their soldiers are facing. You can't discount fear.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this. We've taken quite a deep dive into this doctrine. The operations process plan, prepare, execute, assess, that's the engine for action, built for speed.
Right, but the fuel and the guiding philosophy is mission command. And that philosophy is totally dependent on the individual leader, the professional running the system.
And that leader needs those core attributes. The moral foundation of character integrity, that crucial moral courage, humility.
The outward strength and confidence of presence, fitness, resilience.
And the cognitive horsepower of intellect, judgment, agility, expertise.
And they have to put those attributes into action through the competencies, leading with purpose to build trust and commitment, not just compliance.
And critically, developing others, acting as that steward of the profession.
Yeah, I think that stewardship idea is maybe the most profound takeaway. The sheer complexity of modern warfare, the speed, the stakes. It demands leaders who are more than just good tacticians or efficient managers. They have to be ethical stewards, actively investing in their people's growth, building trust, knowing that ultimately the most powerful weapon system is a well-led, competent, trusted human being.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, our listener, to maybe chew on. If being a good steward means investing significant time and energy today in developing your people and strengthening the organization for the long haul, knowing that the biggest benefits might only appear years after you've moved on, what needs to change in your daily focus, your priorities right now, to make sure you're truly fulfilling that vital ethical obligation to the future?
It's about playing the long game, because ultimately that's the only one that really matters.
That's all for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.